If you're looking to structure your nutrition and get your diet on point to get you to those fitness results you've been looking for, then the first step is figuring out your calories and monitoring them. And then from there, people will generally ask me, well, John, do macros matter? How important are they really? Should I track them? Well, in this video, we're gonna figure out exactly how important macronutrients really are. Hey, what's good YouTube? It's your boy John Mango. I'm here looking pale as ever for some reason. Seriously, I'm here representing Beyond the Iron. I drop weekly fitness content on this channel that's gonna help you get to your fitness goals faster and more enjoyably. So if you're interested in doing so, I recommend that you subscribe. Also, if you stay until the end of this video, I have a free resource that you can use to really help you understand a little bit more in detail about what I'm gonna speak on today, as well as I'm gonna give you a few example ways to calculate and figure out your macros and how to go about tracking them. So stay tuned for that if you're interested, but let's go ahead and dive into the content. So this is not a breakdown of what each macronutrient does to the body, the physiological response and all that. I do have a separate video covering macros and micros, so you can click right above here to check that one out if you're interested in more detail with that. Instead, in this one, like I said at the beginning, we're gonna talk about the importance of each one and how to know which ones to look out for, how to manipulate them according to your specific goals. Now remember, like I mentioned, first and foremost, figuring out your calories should be step number one. You can't really figure out macros until you figure out calories first, and I'll explain what I mean later on. But first, click this video if you need to figure out your calories. Once you've done that, come back here and let's talk about it. Let's first talk about fat loss. If that is your main goal with fat loss, first things first is you need to achieve the caloric deficit. Let's say you've got the caloric deficit, that's great. Now, the reason why macros are so important to track is because a calorie deficit on its own is simply not enough, because if the macros are off, the portions are way off, you're not getting enough protein, you're not getting enough fats, you're not getting enough carbs. If you're not getting enough of any of the macronutrients, it's actually going to lead to results that you don't want, and typically this is what results in weight loss, which we're usually seeking fat loss instead. So that's why macros are important, especially when cutting, because the deficit isn't enough to make sure that we preserve muscle and lose fat on its own. And if you're able to do that, it will ultimately result in better performance, feeling better, no mood swings, or any negative consequences that comes with crash dieting. So let's go ahead and talk about protein first. The protein, when cutting, should be at least 1 gram per pound of body weight. But I say at least, I mean from 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight up to 1.1 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So it's not a big difference. We're not looking for 1.5, 2 grams. It is simply not necessary. However, it is key that you get this protein, and I'll explain why in a second. Next up, you want to make sure that your fats are a baseline. When I mean baseline, I mean you need a certain amount of fat in the body to regulate your hormones, to make sure that things are functioning properly. So because of that, the fats kind of stay at a baseline of at least 20, sometimes up to even 30% of your total calories. Now again, when cutting, something you need to keep in mind is we do want foods that are going to help satiate us, in other words, keep us fuller for longer, in which case fats do that. They slow digestion down, and this could be a huge help in terms of you adhering to your fitness goals, adhering to your diet to notice that fat loss over time through the calorie deficit. And also, you need carbs to lose fat. That's right, I said it, you need carbs. If you're cutting carbs all the way down, here is the main issue with that. Carbs are a protein-sparing macronutrient, which, as the name implies, means you will literally help prevent your body from feeling like it needs to break proteins down, aka gains muscle mass, because it will do so when it's in a state of starvation or a calorie deficit over a prolonged period of time. So that is the reason why, one, we want to keep carbs at appropriate levels because we want to spare the protein. This is also why we're coming back to getting at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, making sure that there's adequate amounts of that, just in case the body does decide that it needs to start breaking down some protein, we have extra in the body running through the blood. Also, the carbs are very, very important for a reason that's commonly overlooked, and that is to maintain or even improve your performance. Okay, so when you go in the gym, your body prefers carbs as a fuel source. Anybody that tells you otherwise has not studied physiology or doesn't understand the connection between nutrition and physiology. Okay, so carbs are important because when you go in the gym, you will lose strength, you will lose muscle, or at least there's a greater chance of you losing those if you're in a big caloric deficit over a prolonged period of time with very little carbs. Trust me, I've experienced it firsthand myself and secondhand through clients all the way in the past, and of course friends, family who chose not to do what I say. So that's essentially the macros you should be aiming for, and hopefully you kind of understand the importance of why you should be tracking those macros if you go and you just cut your carbs, okay? So that's what people like to do when they don't want to track calories, they don't want to track macros, they just cut the carbs. Well, guess what? Your muscle is going to go along with it, your performance is going to suffer, your mood is going to dip, your macros are off balance. There has to be a balance, and this is a big reason why I'm not a big believer in keto. And it's not even about belief, by the way, it's just a simple fact that keto is garbage for 99.9% of the population. Also, I do want to mention, I'm going to be referencing and citing studies at the bottom of the description that you can check out to read a little bit more about the macros and how they affect the body throughout these different goals that you're achieving or throughout these different stages and in these different combinations. Next up, let's move on to muscle gain. So let's say your goal is muscle gain. Well, the key here is a caloric surplus. Now we're on the opposite end, and now the importance of macros kind of shifts a little bit. Let me explain what I mean. Once you're in a caloric surplus, you now have a surplus of energy, hence the name. Now what that means is actually protein's importance does come down slightly. Don't get me wrong, protein is vital to build muscle. However, the amount of protein you need is less simply because you just need enough protein to synthesize the muscle, and you don't need to cover that potential extra protein you may need from being in a deficit and your body grabbing from your protein sources. What I'm trying to say here is your body has more energy than it needs. It will not look for a reason to be breaking down protein, as it's a very complex, very long process. Instead, the importance of carbs actually increases even more here, whereas the fats are coming down a little bit. Carbs become more important because you want to make sure you're maximizing your performance in every single workout to make sure you make the most out of that surplus and put most of it towards gaining muscle, gaining strength, and filling out the right way, gaining the right weight. And then fats will come down again as a baseline simply because your absolute calories are higher. The total percentage of fats will be slightly lower because since you have such a surplus, you don't have to worry about being hungry all the time like you may experience when you're cutting. So that's really it. That's the rough breakdown as to why macros are important and why you should track them. Now, if you stayed until the end, I want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you watching until this point. If you haven't yet, give it a like if you enjoyed the video so far, if you learned something. Comment below whatever else you'd like to see and share with your friends. But first, let's talk about the resource. If you click down below in the description, I have some resources, specifically a 3-video mini course explaining to you how to master flexible dieting. And this course alone, I could probably charge thousands given the value that it has in it. So definitely take advantage of that free resource. Click it down below, sign up for it, and check out those videos. Next up, let's talk about macro breakdowns. Now, a simple way to do this is by doing a 40-40-20 split is what they call it. So 40% of your calories from carbs, 40% from protein, and 20% from fats. My best recommendation for starting for you is kind of what I said at the beginning. Figure out protein first. If you are a male at 200 pounds, 200 grams of protein, you're good with that. Next, take 20 to 25% of your calories and put them towards fats. Whatever is remaining is your carbs. In terms of calories divided by 4, you'll have your carbohydrate intake, and that is the split you can go with. Now, it's also worth mentioning that when you're shooting for protein numbers, if you weigh 300 pounds, you're looking to lose 100 pounds. If you're typically looking to lose, 30, 40, 50 pounds or more, I would aim for 1 gram of protein per ideal pound of body weight, okay? Because if you're trying to sustain 185 pounds of muscle while losing 100 pounds, you don't want an extra 100 grams of protein in there. Instead, you want more towards carbs and fats, and the protein can stay lower. So that's something to keep in mind and mention that I forgot to say earlier. So that is the way I would recommend you start off, and you want to adjust from there. Make sure that you're using MyFitnessPal to track your calories, to track your macros. Very important that you do so for the reasons that I mentioned in this video, and it will make a massive difference in your body composition. A calorie deficit or a calorie surplus is not enough. Where those calories are coming from will determine determines so many things as to how you feel, your adherence, your body composition in the end, your performance, how much muscle you keep, gain, preserve, all of that, okay? So I hope that you understand, I hope that you learned something very important from this video. The key is track your calories, and also, if you want to take it a step further, a very important step, track your macros along with it. Guys, I'm John Mango. Thanks again for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in that next video. Appreciate y'all. I'm out.